part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Warning, this episode contains adult content that could be triggering to past traumatic experiences. I discuss the sexual assault allegations against Deshaun Watson and the circumstances surrounding his now 24 civil lawsuits. Listener discretion is advised. I've been a Browns fan for most of my life. Anytime the Browns are in the headlines, stumble upon a never-before-seen way to lose a game, or make an insane draft pick, everyone feels like they need to check in with me. My phone blows up, and it's texts after text after text. This is the way it's been for as long as I can remember, and I was completely fine with it. As much as I cared about the team, I didn't mind being the quote-unquote Browns fan in most people's life. I wore my fandom with pride. My fandom never wavered. As a matter of fact, the worse the team got, the more zeal I gained for the Browns. I took pride in the team. I could talk about the team for hours, their depth chart, what they should do at each position. I only ever played with them on Madden, and I never drafted or retained a player in any of my fantasy football teams if they played for any other teams in the AFC North, no matter my position of need and no matter who was on the board. I love the Cleveland Browns. I started a whole Browns podcast, which launched a whole network out of my love for the Browns. So much so that whenever we launched a written portion of our website at pressplaypodcast.com, I talked to our editor-in-chief, Holly Wetzel, about writing an article about my fandom for the Browns, about my love for the team. This article was never published. I wrote this on March 1st, and I want to read it to you right now because I think it just paints a picture of how quickly things can turn. This is the article I wrote March 1st, 2022, about my love for the Cleveland Browns. I take the word fan very seriously. I mean, I want to see certain teams do well, but I'm not emotionally or financially invested in the team. Am I an Ohio State Buckeye fan? No. Do I want them to do well? Sure. Tyvis Powell and I talked about this on my podcast a couple weeks ago. I want teams to do well, but I would never consider myself a true fan. To be considered a true fan, I believe you have to know your team inside and out. You have to know your team's roster and be able to name your starters and even most of their backups. A true fan looks forward to the start of the season and has borderline depression when the season ends. A true fan breaks down their schedule and stays up with every game. They stay up to date on all the offseason transactions and even carefully monitor the other teams in their division. A fan sticks with their team through the good years, but a true fan sticks with their team through the bad years, and their passion doesn't waver. They stay equally vocal, equally passionate, equally public, and equally loyal through the thick and thin. Are those high standards? Certainly. Are there people who consider themselves quote-unquote fans but couldn't tell you who their favorite team plays next? Yeah. Do some consider themselves a fan because of team colors and mascots? Sure. But for me, I fan all in, even when my teams are rebuilding or tanking. And I'm not here to fan shame anyone. You can enjoy sports however you want to. You do you. That's the beauty of it all. But I personally take the word fan very seriously. It is well documented the kind of luck Cleveland sports have. Some even go as far to say God hates Cleveland. See the drive, the fumble, the river fire, the sell, the helmet toss, the expansion team, the Indians 1990s and late 2000s, the decision, and the rain delay, to name a few. I've even muttered it a couple times. God hates Cleveland, but that's life, right? You don't always get the things you want. You have highs and lows. You have unexpected setbacks and surprising fortunes. And that's why I'm drawn to the Browns. You see, Cleveland is unlike any other football team in the NFL. Back in 1995, Art Modell moved the football team to Baltimore. Just like that, the city that was home to one of the best home crowds in the NFL had no football team. Immediately, the people of Cleveland started revolting, and over 100 lawsuits were filed by fans because of their effort, dedication, and passion. These fans were rewarded their team back in 1999. The Cleveland Browns returned to the NFL. Tell me any other team that exists because the fans fought for them in court. Being a Browns fan symbolizes hard work and dedication. Cleveland is a blue-collar town, and the Browns represent the people of this great city. Each year we get back up and start 0-0 like everyone else in the league. Each year we think we finally figured it out and are going to somehow make the playoffs. Each year the true fans support the Cleveland Browns. We hold our heads high and defend our team to the end. True fans of the Cleveland Browns are united by hope. Each season, each game, and each play, we are filled with hope. A lot of times we don't get what we want, but that doesn't change our attitude. Being a Browns fan means you believe in hope. And in today's world, what's better to believe in? True Browns fans are hopeful and optimistic. One day we'll get it right. One day it'll be our turn. One day us fans will be able to celebrate the Cleveland Browns are world champs. And I'm here for it. My name is Chase Smith, and I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. Well, I haven't read that since I wrote that and everything happened. Because you see, on Friday, March 18th, 2022, everything changed. The Cleveland Browns traded for Deshaun Watson, the all-star, all-pro starting quarterback for the Houston Texans. He's a quarterback who was celebrated in college, drafted in the first round, and is one of the top quarterbacks in the league. The problem is Deshaun Watson at the time had 22 sexual assault allegations charged against him. And this week, 2 more victims came forward to press charges, bringing this number up to 24. To help explain the Deshaun Watson situation and how we got here, I invited senior NFL writer for the Athletic.com, president of the Pro Football Writers of America, Lindsay Jones, to talk with me about Deshaun Watson. And here is our interview. Lindsay Jones, thank you so much for joining the pod on such short notice. We're talking before the show. Just loved following your reaction responses about the new revelations in the Deshaun Watson case today. And I was like, I just want to talk to you about it. So thanks for coming on the pod.
Sure. You made a really compelling, I guess, nice pitch to reach out. And obviously it's something that's been on my mind a lot. I've been reporting and writing on this for a long time. And, I always want to have thoughtful, nuanced conversations. And that often doesn't exist on Twitter. So if there's forums to kind of be able to talk through how this happened, why we're here, all of those sorts of things, I love to do that. So yeah, even about the tough stuff.
You can't have nice formal conversations on Twitter. What is going on?
Not very often. No. Certainly not about this. I have probably turned off my mentions more times writing about this story than many others. Probably not the most, but it's up there.
Which is absurd. And it shouldn't be that way. And I want to talk about those responses to some of that story here in a second. But Lindsay, help us. How do we get to where we are today? Just as I know this could last, 40 minutes.
We'll do the Cliff Notes version.
Yes.
Right. I think we all kind of know the basics, right? Of the allegations that have been made against Deshaun Watson, beginning in, so just over a year ago, I guess spring of 2021 was when the first lawsuit was filed by a woman who he hired to perform a massage in 2020. And in 2021, she filed a civil lawsuit alleging sexual misconduct. And that kind of opened the floodgates. By the, I guess, spring of this year, there were 22 civil lawsuits. There was a criminal investigation in Texas. So there was a lot of legal stuff going on, both in civil and criminal courts. Nearly all of the civil complaints, they were all, obviously different women, but had a lot of common themes and common experiences that these women said that they experienced, from Deshaun Watson exposing himself, groping them, forcing them to touch his penis, ejaculating on them, to even a couple accusations of more serious sexual assaults, rape or forced oral sex. So, some very serious allegations contained in these civil suits. So he didn't play last year. He had already demanded a trade.
Not because of this, though.
Yeah. So he was already, when all of this began in spring of 2021, he had indicated that he was no longer going to play for the Texans, and he didn't want to be there. He wanted a trade. He was unhappy with a lot of things about that organization. And then the Texans were fine with just paying him not to play last year. He showed up to training camp. It was super awkward. He was the scout team. He was scout team safety. Just this just very weird. He had to be there because they couldn't waive his fines, but everybody knew he wasn't going to play. It was this very awkward, uncomfortable situation. But so he was there all last year. He was paid to be the inactive third quarterback. And everybody kind of was just waiting to see what was going to happen. The Texans really did the NFL and Roger Goodell a favor last year, because if they had decided, no, we're you're gonna play. You're our best quarterback. We want you to play. Then Roger Goodell, I think, would have had to make a decision whether or not he was going to allow that to happen while there was all these civil suits, a criminal investigation was open, all of those sorts of things. But the commissioner's exempt list, which is part of the NFL's personal conduct policy, is in essence a paid suspension. And that's basically what the Texans were doing. So it kind of gave Roger Goodell a pass that he didn't have to go ahead and make the hard decision during last season. But then fast forward to the spring, and the criminal investigation and the criminal case in Houston is wrapping up. Prosecutors there brought it in front of a grand jury. Grand jury declined to return any indictments. And it's been...
Which, to that point, a lot of sexual assault cases go to... They're not really in favor of the victim. It's hard to get evidence. It's a very unfortunate situation.
Yeah, I mean,
in general.
It's very difficult. And also the grand jury process is extremely secretive. These are not public hearings. The lawyers have been under no obligation to talk about what happened. So we don't really know what happened in those proceedings. We don't know what sort of case the prosecutor presented, what sort of evidence. We do know, thanks to some really good reporting by the New York Times earlier this spring, that multiple of the women who had filed, were pursuing charges, were ready and prepared to testify, and they were not brought into the room to do so. So we don't really know exactly what happened there, but ultimately there were no criminal charges brought. And almost immediately once that happened, the bidding war opened for Deshaun Watson services. And it was not just there was one team interested. There were 4 teams that were very actively pursuing Deshaun Watson, which allowed Deshaun Watson, who had a no trade clause in his contract with the Texans, really to dictate what happened next. There was a bidding war. Yeah,
the Dolphins, the Falcons.
Well, so I'm not even including the Dolphins in this. The Dolphins tried to trade for Deshaun Watson last season before
in the middle of
deadline.
All this junk.
Yeah. So, but part of that was that they wanted those lawsuits to be settled. And they were not able to get all of them settled in very short order. And so that trade never happened. The Dolphins were not part of the pursuit this spring. So we had the Carolina Panthers, New Orleans Saints, Atlanta Falcons, and the Cleveland Browns. The coverage of it was pretty gross.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, a horse race, like who's in the lead now? And, all these rumors about who's going to do it and what they were offering. And it very much to me seemed like Deshaun Watson picking his team, and less the teams really truly doing their due diligence into what had gone on in Houston mm-hmm. and what was going on in Deshaun Watson's personal life and all of the ongoing litigation that was happening. The teams would talk about how we flew to Texas and we met with him. And I think it was much more Deshaun Watson deciding where he wanted to play and dictating the contract demands. For a while, the Browns were out of it. And then at the last minute, all of a sudden, the Browns are back in it. It seemed for a while that he was going to go to Atlanta, which is his hometown team. He grew up in Gainesville, Georgia, which is just about 10 miles from the Falcons training facility. He was a ball boy there. It would have been a very safe, sheltered area for him. He went to Clemson, which is not very far away. It's just across the South Carolina border from Georgia, North Georgia, where he grew up. So there were a lot of reasons to believe that why the Falcons might make sense from a kind of a personal standpoint. The Browns always made the most sense of a team that he would pick if we're looking at this from a football perspective, because the Browns had the most complete roster, a team that was probably most ready to win right away out of that group. But ultimately the Browns swooped in, and not only did they trade for trade for Deshaun Watson, they gave up a lot of draft capital to do so. And then they gave him a $230 million fully guaranteed contract, structured in a way that basically, if he is suspended at any point in 2022, he's only going to forfeit a very minimal amount of that salary. So that's really where we were in March. We haven't heard a ton. They ultimately did hold a intro press conference in Cleveland with Andrew Berry, the general manager, with Deshaun Watson, with Kevin Stefanski. The owners, Jimmy and T. Haslam, decided to talk to reporters on Zoom.
Zoom in. We'll just Skype in.
Yeah,
We'll
they were
Microsoft
not.
team this one, guys. Thanks.
So, ultimately the people who signed off on this decision were not there in person to answer questions. And that's the last time we've heard from Deshaun Watson. He has not spoken to the media publicly. He has been at all of the Cleveland Brown practices. He's taken the offense to the Bahamas. He's given Rolexes. Everybody just talks about what a great teammate he is and a football player. And it's just this very weird dichotomy of football life proceeding as normal when, it's not normal surrounding this guy. And it's not going to be normal, I think, for a very long time, if ever.
You mentioned the New York Times and their reporting. Big fan of the New York Times here. Today, we're recording this at the very end of Tuesday, June 7th. They released an article written by Jenny Ventas detailing some of the accounts, but also, dropping that there are 2 more suits being added to the 22. So the number's up to 24.
Yeah, so there have been 2. There was 1 more suit filed last week. Then there was an additional suit filed on Monday. And then the New York Times reporting was just really good, thorough reporting where using, through documents, depositions, other reporting means, they found that over the course of 17 months, Watson had hired 66 women to perform massages. This does not mean 66 women have accused him of sexual misconduct. That 66 does include the 15 women who wrote letters in support of Deshaun Watson and said that they conducted massages that were professional in nature.
That's an issue because previously the number was thought to be much lower than the 66.
Yeah, well, we knew of the 20, there were 22 civil cases. There were 2 additional women who pursued criminal charges who had not sued. So we were in about the 24 range there, plus the women who had sent the letters of support. I believe there was another woman who had initially sued and then pulled her lawsuit. So we knew we were kind of in that 40-ish range of women that we could all confirm he had reached out to and hired to perform massages just in this span of time from late 2019 through 2020, not a long period of time. And that just is abnormal behavior. Right. And I think I think that's a normal behavior for anybody. It's certainly abnormal behavior for a professional athlete who, has great means to pursue elite athletic training. And so there were a lot of, pretty important nuggets in that New York Times story. The number was a big one.
The Texans being aware and providing
the Texans providing the NDAs was
non-disclosure agreements. Yeah.
That he kind of just started handing out like candy, basically, anytime a woman.
So, okay. My reporting, Lindsay, I don't work for the Athletic professional. My reporting is off Reddit affidavit posts.
Okay.
And so, reading some of the affidavits of the people who are accusing Watson of what's going on. I mean, it's very chilling. It's very frightening.
I mean, it's very graphic details. Yes. And, I think maybe to kind of wrap up the how did we get here section or what has been happening is that, all along Deshaun Watson has denied what is happening.
Any wrongdoing.
He said at his introductory press conference with the Browns that he had no regrets. Right. He's indicated that he doesn't even understand why this is happening and why these women are accusing him of anything.
Doesn't need counseling, doesn't see the purpose of any type of therapy or counseling.
Yeah. And I think so that's an important thing to remember as you have been wrestling with how you feel about this as a lifelong Cleveland Browns fan. And then I think the other thing is just to kind of consider the way, what their defense has been. The defense over the course of the last year has been, he didn't do any of this. It was consensual encounters only. To all of these women are liars and after money, to happy endings aren't a crime.
Which last week his lawyer on that, Lindsay, was
on radio.
Talking,
yeah.
And it was just happy endings are a thing on massages. Who doesn't get one of those? It was standard operating procedure. And
and it shows a very tremendous lack of empathy and something that I tweeted about today. And it's kind of just central to all of this to me is the way that I kind of look at this entire situation is that he's always said, I've never disrespected a woman. And to me, everything that is in all of those complaints, all, everything that's been in the New York Times reporting. It just shows a tremendous lack of empathy and lack of like respect for any of the inherent humanity of all of these women. Yeah. And it's easy to say like, oh, I've never disrespected a woman when you don't view these women that you've hired to perform massages as humans, as anything beyond a sex object. And that's kind of where I come down on this, and the thing that I've had a really hard time getting over, I suppose.
It seems he doesn't understand, like, or maybe he does and is just ignorant to it or doesn't want to admit it, like the power he has as a star athlete and as a quarterback, that when just because you ask someone, hey, is it okay if I show up to this naked, and can you, like, would you be okay with signing this and doing like a deep inner groin massage or whatever? He's like prefaced every one of these massages with these like random questions. Like, dude, this isn't a normal situation. You're not a normal client. Like
and also
as a piece of this as well, Lindsay. Yeah.
If there's having a consensual sexual encounter with one woman doesn't mean that the same thing would happen with another woman. Consent is something that has to be constantly asked for with every partner in every situation. In these cases, consent can be removed at any point. So there's just a lot of layers to all of this. But if you want to get into the next, this part is that part's really heavy. So it
sucks. It's difficult. It's hard. And I don't think it gets any easier, Lindsay, because some of these things that I want to like pick your brain on, some of the mental gymnastics you see people like go through and the way that they justify the ability to continue to support this player and even this organization is another kind of like commentary on the state of NFL fandom and it's not, I'm not really shocked because I think it's been like hinted at, whether it's with, how fans in the league treated Colin Kaepernick, or how, and I'm talking about this in the episode, how they treat players who are wrestling with marijuana differently than they do with other like law issues, right? Like there's always justifications going on in the league because no one's perfect. It's not a perfect league, but at some point, and everyone has a different breaking point. And I guess this was just mine where I was like, this is too much, but some people, there's always a way around it.
Yeah. And I think in this situation, there are a number of fans who will believe Deshaun Watson, no matter what in this case. And that will be Deshaun Watson fans. They'll look for every reason to discredit the women, to fall, will completely believe that they're all lying. They're all after money. That's all about publicity, all of these type of things, despite mounting, credible accusations that have been corroborated. And then there's also, I think the other side of that is there's people who will just blindly support a team no matter what, and can kind of put themselves through the, like, try to justify different things of like, well, I can support these guys, or I really like Kevin Stefanski, or I love Myles Garrett and I have to keep supporting these other players that I love. And like, it runs so deep. I mean, we've been looking for a quarterback for 3 decades. And I mean, and I think it is really, really hard. And, we've seen, fandoms like wrestle with stuff all the time of like trying to come to terms with like, the hero that you loved on the field might not have been the guy you thought off of it. But this is a pretty extreme case because of all the things that we already talked about, because of, kind of the blatant disrespect towards women and also the gray areas that are involved. I think it would be probably a lot easier to just be like, screw this guy, everything. If it was like, he had been charged with rape or charged with like, there were violent crimes, weapons offenses, or, and, there's no, evidence here. There's no photographic evidence. And so, I think if you want to support this guy, if you want to support the Browns, you can just say, you can kind of fall in that
he's not guilty.
He was not charged with any crime.
Correct. And that's a better way to word that.
Yeah. And they just
that's why you're the writer and I'm.
Yeah. Well, there's a big distinction between not being charged and being innocent. There's a big difference between being acquitted and being innocent or not guilty. I mean, there's just a lot of like legalese
words matter.
that goes.
Words matter.
Yeah, absolutely, and all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's been tough. I have friends who live in Cleveland who have gotten, who are not in the sports journalism world or whatever. And I'll get I'll get text about like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Or like I was driving into work and the sports radio, I had to turn it off. And like,
you mentioned that this is an extreme case. And I think another element is that this is a quarterback. This is quarterbacks are the face of a franchise, the face of a city. They touch the ball every play. Like they're like, you can't avoid seeing a quarterback on a team. You can't differentiate a team and a quarterback like this. The Cleveland Browns are essentially saying we are okay with this person as a face of no other player, no other position has that responsibility. Very rarely do you see other players on billboards. You do sometimes, but it's the quarterback. And so, Lindsay, what does this communicate to survivors of sexual assault or to people who just feel like they're never listened to at all? Like, what does this communicate to everyone else, like as an organization and as fans who are celebrating this?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clearly that like winning is the only thing that matters. And, I think there's been a struggle for, a lot of female fans in the NFL to like, there's this idea of like, the NFL will sell you pink merchandise, but they don't actually care about women. And this is just kind of another reminder of when we talk about like caring about women and what women are saying and what women are feeling. This very clearly is a sign that the football stuff matters more and is the only thing that matters. And that's, and that's difficult, right? And look, I mean, this is complicated. It's going to go on for a lot longer. There's still, I think, probably a lot of information that's going to come out, but the Browns put their money there. A lot of people are putting their reputations on the line for this guy. I mean, the Haslams they're going to own this team, right? But like, this is their reputation.
This is
now.
Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski. We're putting our careers on the line for this situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, he is 100% a guy that you can win with, but at what cost?
Well, and they would probably get another job. Sorry, I'm that's really naive saying that their careers would be over. They would, if this doesn't work out, they'll probably get another job somewhere. But I mean, it's
yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, and one of the things that we didn't really talk about too, but when we're talking about the Browns and what they're saying here, we know about their kind of due diligence, right? We have heard them say that they're confident in the work that they did and that they did their homework. But we know that largely that homework was visiting with Deshaun and talking to Watson's attorneys and talking to people associated with Watson. They purposefully did not speak to the women themselves.
They were advised against it. That was the words from the press conference.
So every additional lawsuit that has been filed, so 2 more, and then the reporting from the New York Times and Jenny Ventus this week, just really shows how surface level the due diligence and investigations that the Browns and these other teams, I don't want to leave, these other 3 teams out of this because they were all in this as well and pushed the market up and really, kind of accelerated all this entire process. This information was out there if you wanted to try hard enough to get it. And the Browns didn't want to. Yeah. I think they heard what they wanted to hear. And, if Watson said, I swear I didn't do it and there's nothing else coming and I promise that nothing else will be coming, then they look really stupid today. But it's probably not the last time it's going to happen.
He posted an Instagram story tonight. Have you seen that?
I did. Yeah.
Very much not in that heart. He quoted a Lil Baby in a Lil Durk song featuring Rod Wave. So that's where he's at. I'll say this, every new allegation that comes forward, my heart breaks, and it just makes me thankful that I don't have to try to justify that. All of our Browns, like I have a 7-year-old daughter, and we sat her down and had to explain why we're not going to be Browns fans, which was a cool way to have a conversation. Was a conversation you don't want to have, but it was a interesting conversation. All of our Brown stuff is in a tote. I even gave up my fantasy football teams I've been playing for years and years and years, and found other managers. I'm really trying. I just need time away.
Yeah. It's fair. Yeah. I mean, disassociate, and
every new article that comes out just makes it a little easier. And that just sounds really selfish and awful anyway, but that's,
I don't think you're alone. I mean, as many mentions. And I mean, the day that the trade happened, I wrote a column at the Athletic, and it has something like 800 comments on it right now. All of that, I do see and hear a lot of people who are in a very similar situation to you and have been wrestling with this. And I think it's completely understandable, because, you want to believe that you're investing your time and your money and your emotional, well-being or whatever in a team that has your, that supports you too. I mean, they don't. This is what this is saying, right? Is that they just want to win, and they're hoping that enough of their fans will say, cool, we're in the playoffs again, or we're winning games, and we've got an all-pro quarterback, and it's fine.
People are more important than the Browns, Lindsay. And that's kind of what I've had to really truly act on, right? Because it's easy to say that, but to act on that is difficult. Yeah. But Lindsay, this was not difficult. As hard as these conversations were,
we made it through.
It's been such a delight. Thank you so much for your time and coming on Pod to Talk. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was nice to chat with you, and we'll do it again about something more fun.
Sure. Maybe. Where can people follow you and read your stuff? Let's plug some stuff, Lindsay.
Yeah. So subscribe to The Athletic. That's where all my written work is. I'm also on the Athletic Football Show usually once a week. Off-season schedule is a little wonky. We're going to be recording an episode about this in just a few hours in the morning. So if you want to hear me talk more about sexual misconduct and massages and the Browns, that's where you can find me. And then I'm on Twitter at @LindsayHJones.
Lindsay, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. See ya. Following the news of the Browns trade for Watson on Friday, March 18th, I've had many conversations with family, friends, and pastor friends about what to do and what this means. The NFL has had some serious issues, and I all too easily overlooked because I didn't have to deal with it because it wasn't with my Browns. I mocked the Steelers for their support of Big Ben. I was confused at the NFL's treatment of players who tested positive for marijuana but seemed to coddle players who dealt with other more serious issues with the law. I was heartbroken at their treatment of Colin Kaepernick, and the Rooney Rule never really truly seemed to sit right with me. But I kept looking past it all. I kept supporting the league, playing fantasy football, and rooting for my Browns. I was a fan. But this Deshaun Watson stuff, this was too much. This, for me, was my breaking point. Everyone's breaking point's different, and I don't expect the league to be perfect and players to be perfect, but this is different. And if you haven't gotten to your breaking point yet, then that's okay too. But this was too much for me. As I mentioned earlier, my Browns article was never released because I wrote and released a brand new article detailing my journey of breaking up with the Browns. I am no longer a Cleveland Browns fan. I'd be lying if I said I didn't cry over this, and that might make some of you laugh, and that's okay. It is ridiculous. It's also illuminating how unhealthy my attachment was and maybe is to this team. Maybe how I idolize this team. So I wrote a new article. It's still up on the website, pressplaypodcast.com, and today it's the most viewed article. It has the most clicks of all the ones written. It's called Hand in Hand, and this is that article. This is what I wrote. In our launch of written content on Press Play, I had written an article declaring my love and deep-rooted fandom for the Browns. It was great. It was pure. It was bliss. But the Browns' recent pursuit of Deshaun Watson and the subsequent trade for the QB has left me searching for words to say as I process what this means for my favorite team. Thursday morning, 6 days after the trade was announced, I came to the conclusion that I could not cheer for the team and not cheer for the quarterback. In my mind, their support is hand in hand. I can't do it. I can't separate the two. If you cheer and support the Browns, you're cheering and supporting the quarterback. And it took me almost a week to come to this conclusion. Because you see, the quarterback is the most important position in all of professional sports. The QB is the face of the franchise, the leader of the locker room, a presence in the city. The one person on the team everyone knows first. Their name is announced the most. They touch the football every play. The quarterback is integral to the team's success, growth, and potential. It's all tied to the quarterback. And the Cleveland Browns have decided they want Deshaun Watson to be the face of the franchise for the next 5 years. Hopefully, they hope longer than 5 years. This is something I cannot support and do not agree with. I feel if I cheer for the Browns, I am subsequently cheering for Deshaun Watson. And by cheering for Deshaun Watson, I'm sending a message that sexual abuse survivors do not matter. Their stories do not matter, and their voices do not matter. But they do. People are more important than hobbies. People are more important than my favorite NFL team. Yesterday morning, I put 2 of my favorite Browns hoodies in a tote under my bed, and it was so freeing. I didn't hang them back up in my closet. I put them away where t-shirts go to die, in a tote under beds. I honestly hadn't felt a rush like that since the Browns' Week 9 victory over the Bengals in Cincinnati. It felt so good because it was the right thing to do. So I'm done. I'm no longer going to support the Browns. I don't know if this will only last as long as Deshaun Watson is the quarterback, or if it will extend past his time with the team. But I know this is troubling on multiple levels organizationally, and I have some major concerns. I also know I won't be supporting any other team. I'll be putting all my Browns jerseys, shirts, hoodies, posters, pennants, and memorabilia in a box to be stored away. Will I play fantasy football? I'm not sure yet. Will I bet on the NFL? Never started. But I will engage with these difficult conversations because that's important. This is an incredible opportunity to show support to sexual abuse survivors, to be an advocate on their behalf, and to raise awareness. I will explain this to my now 7-year-old daughter, why I no longer and why we will no longer cheer for the Browns, and I will hug her tight as we talk. I will be able to look my son in the eyes when he's older and tell him the value of treating others with respect and dignity. I won't have to justify to myself why or how I can still root for the Browns. I'll be able to sleep easy at night knowing I set an example for my kids that transcends sports. And some of you may be shaking your head wondering how someone could love a team so much it could impact their sleep. Well, sometimes as a fan, that goes hand in hand. So there you go. And look, the last thing I'm trying to do is take spotlight away from the brave victims who have come forward. I'm not trying to do that. I'm simply sharing my journey and my thought process as to why I'm no longer a Browns fan. Let me tell you, each new headline I read about the situation and the deafening silence I'm noticing from the Browns, this decision becomes easier and easier every single day. And I'm glad I don't have to justify or say that that's my favorite team any longer. This was a difficult decision. It shouldn't have been, but it was. It was hard. They were hard conversations with Leslie. As a family, we all came to this decision. But I know it's the right one. So there you go. I am no longer a Browns fan. And this is my message to everyone who might not be aware of where I stand on the Deshaun Watson situation or what I'm going to do. I've already found managers for all my fantasy football teams. I've been in leagues for 15 years that I'm not going to play this year. I love fantasy football. Some of my favorite traditions around fantasy football draft and talking with my best friends about what we're going to do. I'm not going to play this year. So that's it. That's where I stand on the Browns. Thank you for downloading and listening to the Chase Smith podcast. We are proudly part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I will talk to you later. Thanks.